Welcome, attendees. This is social media for elected officials. Today we are joined with Mayor Paul Aziz from Lebanon, Councillor Jessamine West from Astoria, and Councillor Eddie Morales from Gresham. I'm Jenna Jones with the League of Oregon Cities, and we'll just jump right into it. So, folks, I know there are a lot more social media platforms that come out every day, but I know everyone kind of has their one platform. So I'll start off with an easy question of what platforms do you use and which ones do you find most effective? Just from personal experience, I'm a millennial. I don't think that's a surprise to anyone. I like Instagram for personal reasons, but I use Twitter for work a lot and for league stuff. So we'll start with you, Mayor Aziz, and then we'll just go around the, I guess, virtual room.
Thanks. But about 12 years ago when I ran for office, Facebook was kind of the thing. Lebanon area, a lot of older folks, and really that was the platform. Now it's pretty much the same, except the younger folks are using the Instagram, the TikTok, and some of those other. I've stuck with Facebook. The city's stuck with Facebook. We have a huge following on both the pages and on the mayor's page. So pretty successful on Facebook. We just haven't had a ton of users in the area on Twitter and some of the other platforms.
Awesome. So Councillor West, we'll go to you next. What platform do you choose to use?
Yeah, I also only use Facebook. It's the only one I was familiar with prior to being on City Council. It's also the one that the city uses, and from my experience, it seems like the one that most of my constituents use as well. So that's the only one I use.
Awesome. Councillor Morales, do you also use Facebook or?
Yeah, so, Gresham, we have a little over 110,000 people, and our city tends to lean pretty young. So our average age is 35. We're also almost 40% Black, Indigenous, people of color in Gresham. And so, that makes it really interesting in terms of communicating out, but also setting up vehicles to get information and feedback from our community. And so I do tend to think that, like, for maybe our older community and constituents, Facebook is definitely their mode of preference. And I would say that maybe our younger residents like to interact more so with Twitter and Instagram. And so I definitely use all three of those vehicles. About to start trying TikTok, and so we'll see how that goes. But I think the other piece that I would say is that Instagram and YouTube and Zoom have been really important, especially during COVID and the pandemic. People want to see more interaction and video and dialogue. And I think those three are really great platforms for that. Obviously, with Instagram, you're investing a little bit more time in sort of infographics and visual appeal. And, some people want to be able to see information without having to listen or read. And so I think that that's a really great tool for getting information out that way.
Yeah, that's awesome. I will look for you on TikTok if you actually make this jump. I'm excited. I recently found TikTok. So the next thing I will kind of delve into, since we're doing this for elected officials, I know that using a social media platform for a city, a lot of cities choose to do that and have staff run it, but you as an elected official kind of have a little bit more latitude when it comes to social media. So do you run that for your election to your council to advocate for something in some way? Do you use it to endorse candidates or initiatives and ballot measures, because you can do that where public bodies can't, aka the city? And then I wanted to kind of go into some of the logistics, because I know as politicians, I think everyone has this idea, I don't think we do, but that everyone has this great staff that is, creating content for them. So if you could talk about how you logistically run your account and any of those resources that you guys have. And also, since many of you also added that your cities have their own social media account, how that ties in, and if there are any kind of city policies that dictate what you can and cannot do as a councilor or mayor with your social media. So we'll start this time with Councilor Morales, and we'll go the opposite way.
Great. Yeah. So I don't, I know that larger cities do have staff for different offices. At City of Gresham, we're still volunteer for the most part, and we're stipended in our positions. And so we share city staff, but rarely do city staff get involved with our social media accounts. So all of us are managing our own social media accounts. We do have official City of Gresham channels, and our mayor has a channel as well. And those tend to be the official voice of the city. I engage in getting information out to our residents on my social media by spreading information from the city, from the county, and the state that I think is important, as well as also putting out information about initiatives that are coming towards the city, elected officials who are running for office. So I do tend to engage both in politically and sharing of information. I try to make it very clear on social media when I'm doing either or. And most of the time, if I'm going to be talking about something that's official, I tend to reshare information that comes from the official city pages.
That's awesome. So Councilor West, we'll go to you next.
Mine is pretty similar to what Councilor Morales just explained. So the City of Astoria, each city department has their own page, and most likely a couple of people that manage that used pretty much only for information. And that crosses over to my Facebook page. If I share a lot of stuff from city pages, so if there's an event happening at the library, if there's going to be construction, I might mention something that Public Works posted. If the city manager shared something that's informational, a lot of times I'll share that on my page as well. And then as far as to be honest, I don't do a lot of promoting particular candidates. I think a lot of times what I use my page for, and again, as Councilor Morales mentioned this as well, is pushing out information. And I will say that a lot of times I'll give my perspective on, if council voted on something that came to council and I want to explain why I took a particular stance. And typically I'll do that the morning after the vote or the meeting that council had. So again, if something came to council and I took a particular stance on that, the following morning I'll usually say, this was the outcome of that, and this is why I voted or took the stance that I did. I would say that that's those two things, providing information and then clarifying my stance on particular issues. But I don't often use my page to try to push people in a particular direction unless it's encouraging them to get involved. So, the Oregon Department, I think, of Fish and Wildlife, if they're having meetings or public forums, for instance, for encouraging people to voice their opinion on how to use state forest land, that's the kind of stuff that I'll share on my page to try to get people involved. But that's about as far as it goes. It doesn't really encourage people to have a particular opinion.
Yeah, that's awesome. Mayor Aziz, how do you leverage it as an elected official? Oh, you are muted again.
A lot like Jesslyn, really to push that information out, and Councilor Eddy also, get that information out to the community, especially, during COVID and the fires. That's been critical. It really has been, and it's been a godsend for us because it's fast. People getting on their phone. They can have the FEMA app on there. All this stuff is just kind of popping up. And, those wildfires, people were called in the middle of the night at times, to get out of the places they were in. So the social media really helped in that. Our city has a couple staff members in the clerk's office, and they do our Facebook page. We have a city Facebook page, we have a city police department Facebook page, a library, and a senior center Facebook page. And they're really well received. And during COVID, the library Facebook page has just gone skyrocket. The lessons and the interactive games and things that they've done have been fantastic. So that's been really, really important. And I do keep mine specifically with city and council business. And I don't push too much of a political agenda or vote for a candidate or anything like that on that particular page, because I know people see me as representing the city, and I want to make sure that they see me as fair and balanced, I guess.
That's awesome. So I think this next question will kind of get into some of those places where you can have an additional outlet. How do you balance personal views and your public persona? I know personally, I lobby for the league, and when I started lobbying for the league, I actually created a secondary Twitter account that became my I will advocate for telecommunications issues on this account because I don't want it to get mixed up with my personal account where I have my own views and thoughts like that, and I kind of locked that down. So I mean, and the stakes for me aren't very high, but for you guys who are elected into office and have constituents and have to run for re-election and things like that, I know that's hard. So do you guys use multiple accounts? And then how do you also, I know you touched on it before, trying to really focus the message on information, but if you guys want to talk a little bit more about that personal views and public persona that you have to balance. And Councilor West, I will start with you this time.
I would say that probably it's 10% personal and 90% political or informational, because I don't think that we are elected for our personal views. I think you're really, as an elected official, you're really taking in a lot of the information, whether that's code, you're listening to people all the time, and you're trying to make as educated decisions as possible based on that for the community. And so I might have very personal views about things that come our way, but those might not be in the best interest of those that I'm representing. And so the 10% personal, we're also not robots up there. So I do want some of my personality and feelings to come through, either through my position or through my interactions or through social media. And so some of that, I want people to understand where I'm coming from and who I am and things that I'm passionate about. And so some of that personal does come through in my posts. But I think, like we've all said, we do try to keep them more informational. You try to use social media as a constructive tool, as a method of communication. And so it's that 10% to 90% ratio. And I would say that that's probably in line with how I vote or take a stance on things when they do come to council.
Yeah, that's awesome. Mayor Ziz, how do you balance your public and personal personas?
Mine's pretty similar to Councilor West. Yeah, generally, I try and push information. That's the one thing. Very rarely do I give personal opinions. The one time that I have and done recently, since March, was during the pandemic and also the fires. When I did live feeds, I was a little different. I was a little bit more fireside chat. I said, I'm sick of this, I know you are too, we're all in this together. It really helped people to be real and to talk to people and to not be a stoic person. And I felt that was a great platform because we were interactive. People were commenting and putting hearts and angry faces or whatever it is down below. But there were great questions, and I felt that was the time to be able to do that, and it worked very well. The other thing too is I have a separate, and I forgot to mention this, I have a separate Paul for Mayor account so that when I do go up for election, it's separate from the mayor account. And then that way, when I do an election, it's all election stuff on there, and it's about issues and it's about that. And then I keep the mayor account just straight city business.
That's awesome. That I think I've seen that especially with a lot of congressional folks that I have followed in past years, where they have their election account and they have their like when I've been elected to office account. And I think that's definitely smart to kind of balance all of the different facets of someone's life. Councilor Morales, how do you do the balancing act of social media?
Yeah, so I have a personal account that I use for family and friends, and then I have my counselor Morales page, and that one I try to really come through as like who I really am. I think when I ran for office, I was very sort of transparent about like, here's who I am, here's what I stand for, here's what boards I serve on, and this is the perspective that I bring to our council. And so, I won't share things that don't relate to the city of Gresham on my counselor page. I guess that's how I think about it. So if I'm at a local event, or if I'm on a local board that is doing work in the city of Gresham, or an initiative that's coming to town, or I will share my perspective on those things. And I think that those are my personal views as well. But yeah, I guess I think of myself as like having been elected to really represent this perspective that I bring that is unique. And so I try to really preserve that on my social media and on the council as well. And so.
Yeah. And I think more and more people are craving authenticity, even in the channels of like social media, because I said this before, but we are not screens. There are people who do the things behind everything. And so some of those humanizing things, it was great to hear Mayor Aziz say that, like live streaming is one of those things that can make people a little bit more like human and kind of negate some of the stuff that goes. So I know that we all use social media and it's great, but I know that not everyone gets and reads their information on social media. And so how do you use social media in conjunction with other outreach methods? Because while it is engaging, and I think Councilor Morales, you alluded to this earlier, it's great for like young people who want things right now or in an emergency situation. But there's just some things you can't really compute over social media. So how do you guys kind of work that into your broader outreach, and then also how it kind of weaves into your city's broader outreach in how you guys do things? And I will go back to Mayor Aziz and have you start this one off.
Okay. I'm sorry, I just lost my train of thought. Could you just re-cue me on that?
Yeah, that's no problem. So social media is not the end all be all engagement strategy,
Okay.
as,
That's good.
some millennials might think. So how do you weave it into the broader outreach to your constituents and to your community members?
It's difficult. Some of the messages, we'll put a message on one of the water bills, or some of the ways we can get to a lot of the constituents. We don't have a newsletter. We do have a website, and we have news feed on the website. So there's a lot of people that don't necessarily do Facebook and other social media, but they will go on to at least look at a website and see what the latest information is. So those are really the key things that we do. Our Zoom and YouTube meetings, we've been Zooming and YouTube since like 2012, I think it was. And so that's been very positive, because people can go to any meeting, they can look exactly what happened, and then they can comment to us back on it. And all of our counselors and myself have links on the website, so they can just click and send us an email.
That's super awesome. I just found out that you were the hipster of Zoom. You were doing it before it was cool, and pandemic necessitated that. Councilor West, what are your other engagement strategies outside of social media?
Well, I really see, and I actually want to mention briefly, I completely concur and appreciate what Councilor Morales and Mayor Aziz said about remaining authentic in social media. Because I feel like if you're not, people won't listen. And then if you go way to the other side, where everything you post is personal, or your posts are really inflammatory, or tend to not stay on top of the issue, people will also stop listening to that as well. And so I think balance is a really good way of putting that, as far as your personal opinions, and as far as what you want to stay on topic with what's city related. To answer this question, I really see myself as having an ever expanding or contracting toolbox as a city councilor. And social media is just one thing in there. Occasionally you throw things out of the toolbox that aren't working anymore, or that never worked to begin with, and then you really try to utilize the things that are working well. And so most of my constituents don't use social media. So again, it just becomes one thing of many that you use to try to keep that line of communication open. I will say, if I could do one thing differently at the beginning of my term, I would have created my own either blog or website, because I feel like a lot of people that don't want to use social media, like Mayor Aziz said, they'll still go to a website. And so that might be another effective tool that elected officials could use in collaboration with social media, or if they're not on social media at all. But here in Astoria, people use the paper. They read the Daily Astorian pretty religiously. We have a community radio station. So I use a lot of those types of outlets, as well as in person, a little less now because of the pandemic, but in person or Zoom meetings that are like, meet the counselor meetings. So again, social media is just one avenue to try to reach the people that use it.
That's awesome. I hope we get back to in-person things sometime soon.
They're so much better.
Counselor and coffee sounds really good right now. So Counselor Morales, what are the other tools in your toolbox for engagement?
Yeah, so I totally agree with everything that's been said today. We, on the city side, we do forums on different topics that we host, and before COVID, we were doing those in person, and it'll be around topics that we are hearing coming up in the community. Now we're doing those via Zoom. Actually, our participation in our city council meetings have gone higher since we've been on Zoom. We have over 100 people who kind of tune in to watch our city council meetings. But I also just on Sunday, I had my first in-person event. I partnered with a local restaurant, and we had a drag show. And it was, we put all the tables where they were 6 feet apart and sat groups in their parties, and required people to wear a mask. And so, and drag queens wore like shields. And so there are ways to still practice safe social distancing, and still, I think our communities are really yearning for that in-person contact, even if they can't be very close to one another. And those experiences, we have like a small concert coming up. And so I think I really try to connect the social media to some of the like in-person events and coffees and things of that nature. I do have a website that I keep up, and it's just eddymorales.com, and I write blog posts on there, Councilor West. And so around committees that I'm doing or work that's coming up, and I also feature other local leaders. I use sort of a magnetic type website that has the blogs on there, and really try to get people to see that as a resource that they're coming to. And there's a lot of acquisition on there. So people are constantly being surveyed around issues that are important to them. They're being asked to volunteer. They're being asked to sign up to be on my email list. And so that list has been growing pretty quickly. I also do text banking. So I do text messaging out. I'll probably do like 14,000 folks that I can reach through text messaging. And so do a combination of mail, text messaging, social media, email, and my website. I constantly putting out information.
That is fantastic. I don't think I've heard of anyone using that. Go ahead, Mayor Aziz.
I just had a question, just after thinking about what Councilor Eddy was saying. I've got a website that is part, and I have my feed from Facebook. It's kind of weird. I had to kind of do some tweaking. My feed from Facebook just goes to that page. So when they see it, they're actually reading Facebook feeds, and they don't have to be on Facebook. Now, there could be some permission issues. Certain posts won't show right. But in general, you get to see everything that I posted on the mayor's page. So it works out pretty good. At least it's getting it out there for those that aren't on social media.
RSS feeds are huge when trying to duplicate messages in multiple places. I know we've used some of those things in the past in various conference apps and things like that. So it is helpful. Councilor West, did you have something to add?
Well, just concurring with that, like a lot of, if you use multiple platforms, including a website, like integration between the platforms is pretty savvy and effective now. So it can make your work a lot easier. You can cross-post and do things like that. So I think that's a great idea. And I think the live feeds that Mayor Aziz mentioned, we have our mayor over in Warrenton has been doing, would do, I think it was like story hour or something with the mayor. And as Councilor Morales mentioned, you know, a drag show. So these kinds of things that are not, they don't have to necessarily be political. They can be more focused on person-to-person engagement. And so I think during these last 6 months in particular, that's been really important for people. I've seen that on my own page as well, where people they're really just in some ways looking for that human connection. And so I think things like that are extremely effective.
Yeah. I also will say the great thing about social media as being a tool in the toolbox is it's not super expensive. As long as you have an internet connection, a cell phone will do, things like that. You have kind of a camera, you have like all of these things to kind of produce polished results in like a meaningful way pretty quickly, instead of if we were, you know, in the early 2000s, that would have been a lot, like would have required more equipment and this, that, and the other. I think that it's accessible to a lot of other people as well. And so getting it is definitely an amplifier. It is not the end all be all. You already have to have a message to then give out, but it definitely amplifies.
Good question.
Yeah, go for it.
Or just want to mention, one of the things that someone just turned me on to a couple of weeks ago, and I'm in love with, is Canva, C-A-N-V-A. There's a lot of other products out there, and they're different things, but something to create infographics, something to make a quick picture. It can increase your posting. It helps you get stuff out that you want to get out, and it looks professional. And that's something that I just started using. I love it.
Yeah, and I think that's a really key when we're talking about what Councilor West said, you know, cross-posting and things like that. I think we also have to be true to different platforms and why they're there, right? You don't use YouTube to like put a bunch of text up. It's a video platform. Facebook is everything. You can do video, you can do pictures, you can do just text. And like Instagram, like Councilor Morales said earlier, you have to have a picture. And so infographics become a lot more key to those things. And so having those tools to help you cross-post, but in a way that creates the content that the platform truly wants is awesome. So that's a good tip. So now that we've kind of painted this really rosy picture of social media and how great it is, and it's this great and awesome tool, I know there's a dark side. There's a dark side to the internet too. One, it lasts forever. So we can post something today, have different opinions later, and it might come back. And we might have to be presented with it. And but you know, there are also comments that aren't always super helpful or in line with we thought we were like the intention of a post. And there are even comments and interactions that are probably far worse than we had even thought possible on interacting with it. So one of the things I kind of want to delve into is how you guys go into dealing with negative feedback on social media, and then a little bit of how you kind of differentiate between internet trolls who will just be mad for being mad, and those who actually have good criticism that might be in a different view than what you're posting about, but there's dialogue that can be reached and had during those interactions. So we'll start with you, Councilor Morales, and how you deal with that on your various platforms.
Yeah, I think it's really important to remember that social media, like, it's still about relationship building, and it's still about trust and authenticity. And so a couple of things that I would say is just, I encourage everyone right off the bat to put a disclaimer on their social media pages around like a policy, right? So these are still your pages. These are still your accounts. You get to set the rules for what is acceptable and not acceptable on there. And I think as long as you put that up ahead of time, it is fine to take down posts that have profanity, that, suggest violence or hate. And so I would just recommend that everyone sort of start with that, because then you have something to stand on in terms of a policy, and it doesn't feel like you're just kind of nitpicking what posts you're going to accept. So like creating some community standards and putting those up in your like about or your bio section, I think is really a tip that will eventually protect you in the long term, because you don't want to chip away at that trust and authenticity, and you don't want to be seen as someone who only handpicks certain things. The other thing that I'll say about authenticity is that you're going to have, the truth is you're going to have people on your social media accounts who are supportive of you, and they've chosen to follow you, they've chosen to get their information from you because you have that relationship and that rapport and that trust. And so, when I do get people who come on and will drop a comment or something, a lot of the times the community that I've already built on my social pages will do the job for me of going in and correcting misinformation, or reminding people that that's not a community standard on my platforms. I will hide. So a couple of other tips: I don't delete posts. I tend to hide them when it is like someone like a troll, or because they still see that it's up, but no one else in the community sees that it's up. And so that it prevents people from wanting to come back and repost the same thing over and over, which just, can be distracting. The community agreements is the other one. And then the other piece that I would say around it is that, well, I'll leave it at that for now. I'll come back later when we get to the tips.
That's totally fine. I will just like put a plug in here that I am not a lawyer, and I don't know if any of us on this call are lawyers, and people should check with their city attorneys because social media law is kind of ambiguous at this point, and I think people have preferences between hiding, deleting posts, things like that, and what works best for if you're representing your city and how they want that to be dealt with on a public record standpoint. And I will also shamelessly plug that the league does have a like draft social media, or a sample social media policy. If anyone wants that, they can go to our website. So
right. I'm only speaking from my perspective and as a volunteer and as a counselor. Yeah.
Totally fine. I know that and people have different opinions on that, and I've heard different lawyers go back and forth on what they would do at various social media conferences and things like that. So it is really a personal preference. But if someone has like a struggle with coming to an agreement, I think city attorneys are a lovely resource that can be leveraged. So Councilor West, how do you deal with negative comments and negative interactions?
Well, I'll just reiterate what Councilor Morales said, is that it is still about relationships, very much so. And so my advice would be to, just as if you were in a room with someone, to learn to apologize. Just be very honest in your communications, whether people are agreeing with you or pushing back or not. And if you posted something that later ended up not being true, or more information came out and you changed your mind, again, just be honest about that. I think that people really respond to the admission of human error and that level of transparency. And I would also say I would completely concur with having on your page a community standards policy, I think that that's really important because it's something that you can point to when things are getting heated or difficult. And if that's happening a lot with particular issues, you can, in Facebook, you can pin that post at the top to kind of draw attention to that. I have, as far as trolls go, I mean, I think that, which is different than negative comments, I think that as an elected official in these types of situations, you really learn when it's conducive to engage with someone. And if it's not, I mean, there are a few people that I just do not respond to. I don't delete their post or hide it in those cases, because I certainly don't need everybody to agree with me on my page. And so if they push back or post something that's negative, it's in some ways a benefit to the conversation or the community to see that, even if I'm choosing not to respond to it. And the things that I choose not to respond to is if I know that the dialogue is not going to do any good. It's not worth my time. It's not worth the community that may be looking at its time. And so I just leave it. Now, I do think that as an elected official, you have a responsibility to create a healthy house for your social media page. And so if something is damaging, or maybe has made people feel like even afraid to post on a thread, I have deleted or hidden posts or entire threads. You know, one example would be when I came out, I'd been attending the Black Lives Matter protests along with our mayor and come out in support of that movement, knowing that there would be some backlash. And again, some of that is okay, but if it crosses a line where it is unhealthy or damaging to other people that are reading it because it's racist, get rid of it. That is, I think that is completely fine. Again, I think you have a responsibility. This should be a productive forum that people feel like they can speak their minds and not feel threatened. And Facebook, you know, although they're not always the best at it, does have a policy around reporting posts, which I definitely do. If something is racist or promoting violence, if there's a threat there, I will report and delete those. And there are a handful of people that I have also blocked. And so, you know, again, just want to reiterate the importance of creating a healthy environment on your page.
Yeah, for sure. I think I relate from doing some things on the league social media account. We definitely have some people who are kind of reoccurring that are always negative, and you've tried to have dialogue with them and you kind of gain that experience to be like, I don't think that this will be conducive today or tomorrow. So we'll just leave it there. And if we need to respond, we will, but you gain the experience and knowledge of this is how this interaction goes.
Yeah, and leaving stuff up, like Councilor Morales said, a lot of times other people will respond to that, and it does become a certain pathway to engagement. And some of those pathways do create, the outcomes are amazing. Like there is exchange of information and opinions that do have productive outcomes. And so, you know, you don't just want to hide or block, or again, anybody that disagrees with you. So there is a way to constructively engage. And so it's pretty incredible when that happens as well.
Yeah. So Mayor Aziz, would you like to add anything on your experiences with this?
I agree with both counselors, and the statements are critical. I have that on mine, saying that it does not represent the view of the council, doesn't review the view of the city, and that it's my personal view. So that page is mine, and that has helped. I've had the angry, cranky people on there, And usually I'll engage them until it gets to the point where, as they've said, it's not productive and you know it's not going to go anywhere other than down the drain. So at that point, then I usually will stop conversation, or I'll warn them. And if they continue or they're swearing and that's not allowed on my page, then those kinds of things would get the person blocked eventually, or the thing hidden or removed. So I've done that, and it's very difficult. The one thing I want to mention is other pages on social media, like the local page for your town or community. We have a town of 16,000 people, and this page has like 20,000 people on it. So where do they all come from? So a whole lot of people that don't necessarily live in our town, but there's a lot of people in there, and everybody's got a great opinion and everybody's right. But it just gets horrible in there. They'll mention the water rates, and that just goes on for days and days and days. And I just stay off that page completely. The only time I'll go on there is if someone's brought something to my attention, or I happen to be over there looking at something, and I think that something's really not presented correctly, and I want to get the information out that's proper. It's the only engagement I'll do over on those pages. Otherwise, I come back to my page and they can read that page.
Yeah. I've definitely heard of people leveraging other platforms like Nextdoor or community pages on Facebook to they keep track of it. They don't usually dialogue within it, but if it becomes an issue on a city page or an elected page, will address, try to set the record straight, because it is an eye into the community on some of the issues that are bubbling. So that's really important that you brought that up. So we're kind of coming to an end of this session. So I'm going to jump to our last question, and we have about 5-ish minutes. If each of you guys could go around and give your top 2 tips about social media, and that you would give either a newly elected official or a elected official who's just new to social media, and what they can carry on from this session. So I think we'll start back with Mayor Aziz, and then we'll just go the original order that we started with.
I think the first one we've already talked about, but that's one of my top tips, is to keep your accounts separate. Keep your mayor or your council page completely separate from the actual city page and from your personal page. Have something specific. And then the other thing is be real, be genuine, be who you are, even on your particular council or mayor page. Be who you are, and that is why you got elected, is because people liked you. They liked your ideas. They liked, I know Councilor Eddie said those things. You know, they voted for him, for me, for Councilor West, because of something that they just liked about you. And it is that personal, that's what politics is, especially local. It's that close personal contact, and social media kind of helps bridge that, especially during the COVID pandemic. It's the one way that we have to communicate. So I think those are my 2 top tips.
Awesome. Councilor West, what are your top 2 tips for elected officials?
I would say that my first would be that personally, I don't feel if an elected official chooses not to use social media, as long as they're employing other methods of outreach, that makes them less effective. So I want to encourage people to use it, especially if you're, of course, a governor, something that has a much wider reach, and to not be afraid to use it. You know, there is a way to constructively manage it, but if ultimately you choose not to use social media, I think that that's okay. Again, as long as you're attempting to reach your constituents in as many other ways as possible. And then the other thing I would say is that, you know, if you do choose to use social media, use it consistently and constructively. It's a form of communication, so I would not treat it much differently than if you were speaking person to person with someone, or in a room with a group. I think that the lack of accountability that sometimes social media can produce or encourage is the unfortunate side of it. And so again, just remember that you are communicating with your community. And so I think that would be my main 2 points.
That's awesome. I know most communities aren't just like all millennials and Gen Z people in one place that use social media and need it. So that, I liked your first point about kind of read your community and if social media is even appropriate or effective in the engagement strategy. Councilor Morales, we'll finish up with you. What are your top 2 tips?
Well, a lot of what's already been said. You know, I think the big piece is remain authentic and remain unique. Otherwise, you know, people could go anywhere else to get information. I would say think before you post and take a moment before you post. You had mentioned something earlier, Jen, about like the internet is forever.
Yes.
I have not posted anything yet that I have regretted posting. And when I am in like a heated moment, I will draft my post, step away, think about it, and then most of the time I'll decide not to post something. Yeah. So I think, you know, just giving yourself the time, sleep on it if you have to, because these things do stay up there forever, and people do screenshot stuff and these. And again, I think when we get to a place where we're level-headed, then we tend to not make those kinds of mistakes. I would say remember that you are the leader and the elected official, and so don't attack people or don't speak down to people. The optics of it, because we are elected officials, even when someone is maybe not telling the truth about you or a situation, the optics are always in people's favor because you are the one with the platform, and you have to be very, very sensitive about how you toe that line because you are in the position of power, and that will always not be in your favor. Can I just do one more?
Sure.
Because I really do use social media to engage, and I found this formula that's worked really well. So I will normally tell people what, like, let's say we have our meetings on Tuesdays. I will normally tell people before the meeting, we're going to talk about this thing, and this is what the item is and how it relates to people. Tune in. And then very much like Councilor West, I like to give a report out afterwards. And you always want to I like to have a call to action with everything. So like join the meeting, or after the meeting, like watch the video, or, you know, give us your feedback on something. It should be two-way communication when you're on social media, and nobody wants someone that just spews out stuff without ever really engaging or responding. So be thoughtful about how you post and how you create open-ended questions to get feedback on stuff. So.
Yeah, that's awesome. Don't be a megaphone. I think that's the one thing that, at least at the league, that we're very conscious of, is that we don't want to be a megaphone to people, because that's not what these are for. It's social media for a reason, and people want to have interaction. So thank you all so much for choosing to be our panelists, and thank you for giving insights into elected officials on social media. I envy you in some ways, and in other ways I really do not, but I think you guys all do a really great job. So thank you so much, and then we'll see you guys for the live Q&A.